So right at the beginning, today, we're talking about this koan and a verse about a dream. It's from the Book of Serenity, which is one of the three great koan collections. There are others, but these are the three earliest and best known. And the Blue Cliff, the Gateless Barrier, and the Book of Serenity. And and they're all full of odd things. You know, there are times when they just have a nice koan, and that's great. Other times they have a nice koan and a nice verse, and other times a nice koan and a terrible verse, and things like that. But because you tell a teacher to just dash out a verse to fit the koan. Sometimes it was great, and sometimes it was, I don't know, you know. So, but this is one of those ones that it's a famous koan, and it also has some really interesting verses in it. So I wanted to talk about them. And they're about, I don't know, they're about the dreamlike nature of life, I guess, really. Delusion is a kind of dream and a kind of sleep. And the Zen thing goes different ways in that. It says, well, you can wake up even in the dream, you know, and that even waking up is a kind of different dream. And so we need to be welcoming of all that, you know. So the koan is, when deluded, you're like a knight in a dream. After enlightenment, you're like a farmhand rising from sleep. A very simple consciousness, a very simple life, you know. So here we are. This is a case of the Blue Cliff record, I think case 90. No, sorry, of the Book of Serenity, I think case 90. Yes, case 90. And it's a well-known story that Yangshan was Guishan's student, and Guishan was very deep, and he's the guy who went off into the mountains alone to sit, and he sat for years, and it had been prophesied that his temple would grow and swell, and it didn't actually. And sometimes happens with prophecies. And so he sat there for like 10 years, and the villagers would sort of help out with food, and he'd grow some of his own crops, you know. But he didn't have any students after 10 years, and he said, "Oh no, I think I gave it a good try." And so he sort of, you know, packed his few possessions in a little bundle, and he turned to go, and his robe snagged on something, and he just tried to pull it free, and he couldn't get the sleeve free, and so he turned around to free it, and there was a tiger holding onto his sleeve, and he said, "Oh, perhaps I better stay a bit longer. 10 years isn't enough." So and then his temple thrived, and people came and built a village there, and all that sort of thing. So that's the teacher here, who actually otherwise doesn't have sort of miraculous things, legends associated with him, but Yangshan does. And when he was just a kid, he had this, he was a sort of prophetic dreaming kind of person, and he had this dream that he saw himself along with the Buddha and 27 ancestors, 28 ancestors actually, all assembled together in a temple. And the whole was in space with no pillars or stones. The color of the floor was emerald. And he was aware of himself looking like the ancestors with bare feet. And he was in the 8th place. And somebody said to Buddha, "Buddha, today I'm responsible for the teaching." And then Yangshan got up and went and hit the board, bang, hit the lectern, and said, "Let the assembly clear their minds. The great vehicle teaching is beyond all circumstances or declarations or any of that stuff." Predication is how Cleary translates it here. Predication, a mysterious word. And then later on, when he was a student of Guishan's, Yangshan, he had a dream where he went to Maitreya's place, the future Buddha, and was seated in the third place. And one of the blessed ones hit the signal board and with a gavel and said, "Now the one in the third seat will teach." So you show up in the dream to this great temple, and then somebody says, "Today you're going to teach." And he said, he struck the lectern and said, "The teaching of the great vehicle is beyond all conditions," or predication is the word he used, and predication is one of those words that I never know what it means. So, I looked it up. It comes from parts of speech and things like, subject, verb, predicate, things like that, and Aristotelian grammar, perhaps, and so, but it means announcements, any declarations. It's a bit like Bodhidharma's thing. What is the first principle of the holy teaching? There isn't one. What is all this predicated upon? It's not predicated upon anything. That's it, right? What does your great truth depend on? It doesn't depend. It's beyond depending on things. So it's kind of rather sweet, but I still don't understand the word. And I have this feeling like, I don't know, there's something I'm not remembering about it, but it doesn't matter. The OED doesn't make it more clear. So the predication, it's beyond announcements or declarations or right or wrong or existence or non-existence is what it really comes down to. Whether you're alive or dead, existing or non-existing. So quickly, right now, are you existing or non-existing? What's the right answer? Yeah, I did study with a teacher once who would say the right answer is always, "Ha!" Because that's not existing or not existing, it's just there. Okay, so in a dream, and the person who collected the Wansong, who collected the Book of Serenity, says, "In a dream, wrapped in his patchwork robe, he calls on the elders, the ranks of the saints serene, he sits to their right, responsible for humanity, he doesn't defer." In other words, he goes up and hits the thing, even though he's only 8 and he's in a dream and stuff like that. He thinks, this must be done. The sounding board rings, expounding the teaching without fear. The lion roars its mind as the mind is as peaceful as the ocean. Heart as big as a bushel. It's a wonderful, strange thing. A bushel is a big measure of grain usually, and but it's from some very antique poem about someone, I think a general, whose heart was as big as a bushel. So anyway, his mind is as peaceful, the lion roars, the mind is as peaceful as the ocean, the heart as big as a bushel. Fish eyes shed tears, clam guts open in pearls. Beyond all predications. And then there's this other poem by Longya about wake and sleep. In a dream, how can you know the dream is unreal? Only when you've awakened do you realize what was in the dream is non-existent. When deluded, you're like a knight in a dream. After enlightenment, like a farmhand rising from sleep. And the Lotus scripture says this really interesting thing. It says, always dreaming this good dream. If you think of your life, did you have coffee this morning or tea? Always dreaming this good dream. Is there someone you love? Always dreaming this good dream. Are you afraid of something? That's always dreaming this good dream too. Even waking from the dream is this good dream. So, Yeah, always dreaming this good dream. And so there's another really nice piece here, which is Great Master Chan of Daming Monastery in Xi Province liked to compose poetry and to talk and laugh. He wasn't serious and solemn. To talk and laugh. Master Heng of Renshan instructed an attendant to keep him under control. The great master said, human life is one dream. Enjoying a lifetime is a good dream. Enjoying a lifetime is a good dream. Keeping a life under wraps is a bad dream. So there you go. I would rather have a good dream. So that's great. That's the great master. Chan of Daming. Human life is one dream. Enjoying a lifetime is a good dream. Keeping life under wraps is a bad dream. I would rather have a good dream. So he was on that. There's always these two streams running in Buddhism. The people who say, don't do anything, and the people who say, enjoy yourself. And they're the same dream in a way, striking the sounding board, they say here, is, when Yangshan hits the sounding board, Han in Japanese, it's not necessarily referring just to the sounding board. It could be a bell or a wooden fish, etc. It's making that sound, making the sound. People get awakened by a sound sometimes, a train whistle, a car backfiring, things like that. I have a friend who had a great awakening experience, was driving back from the Zendo in Los Angeles, and somebody hit the radio in the car, and she was in the back seat, and it was playing some soap opera. There was an advertisement for a soap opera came and said, if I can't have him, no one will. And then gunshots rang out on the radio, bang, 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 and suddenly she had a great awakening. So there we are. The sound of the wooden bell, the wooden board or the bell. And in the scripture of Realizing the Way, it says, the lion roar speaks fearlessly. Its mind is peaceful as the ocean. It's kind of true. You've probably, I don't know if you've been out in lion territory in Africa, you hear the kind of peaceful quality of the lion roaring far away. If it's right up against you and you sort of don't have a tree to climb, it might be another thing. But the lions just roar, I was in a Land Rover, and the guy driving the Land Rover wanted to show me something special, and we went off track to see some rhinos, which were indeed there, and very skittish, shy people, a little worried about being hunted, I think. So anyway, the rhinos were there, but then a ranger came along. We weren't supposed to be off track, and a ranger came along and said, not good, shouldn't be off the track, and but you could tell the ranger was kind of a sweet guy, and there's this short conversation in Swahili going on, and he was looking kind of stern, and then suddenly a lion roared, and he said, Simba, and he just smiled, and everything became peaceful. The world is good, the lion is roaring. So it's like that. Everything, and so it's a marvelous, marvelous image for what life can be like. No matter how much turmoil you consider you're in, there's terrible trouble, someone's dying. It's all right. Yeah, it's all right. Dream. Oh, Henry James said this great thing, which I'll give you, which says the same thing as the great master of Daming, Master Chan of Daming. Live all you can. It's a mistake not to. It doesn't matter so much what you do in particular, so long as you have your life. If you haven't had that, what have you had? So, and that's quoted by reading Lolita in Tarrant, which is a great book, Azar Nafisi. Anyway, she quotes Henry James, which is kind of nice. If you haven't had your life, what have you had? So, very good. You know, here's somebody who hasn't been on for a while, has been our referee, Angela Rockall from from southern Tasmania. We've been wondering where she was, so here she is. Hi, Angela. It's like before dawn where you are, I think, right? Yeah.
Yes, it is, and the days are getting shorter and shorter, of course, here. So this farmhand woke from sleep to wild gales. There's everything that can rattle is rattling, and everything that can roar is roaring, and fast-moving clouds with, of course, the almost full moon lighting them up, and not really competing with that, an aurora,
Wow.
because it's nearly peak sun. So just that, the wildness of that going on outside and the quiet in here, and lovely to be with you. It's my field report.
Thanks, Angela. We're a bit jealous of the aurora.
Yeah, aurora envy is a thing.
Well, also the gale. Yeah, I remember those gales. You know, I grew up in those gales, so it's the gales
Yeah,
of the equinox. Yes.
yeah, and wild, straight off the Southern Ocean. Mm,
Well, thank you. It's lovely to have you here.
thanks. Lovely to be here.
Okay, Tess Beasley.
I really found myself feeling into the juxtaposition between the knight and the farmhand, and noticing a lot how most of my own delusions always get linked in some way to ideas of success or failure, or what I'm responsible for or not, or, there's always some massive narrative component that feels very much in the territory of the knight. What needs to be avenged in the world, what needs to be seen or found, or, and the more that narrative progresses, then the amplification of the delusion intensifies and starts to feel more real. And I was thinking, aside from myself, there was an incredible article this morning in the New York Times about a guy who in 2018 found this strange loophole that allowed him to live in a hotel in New York for 5 years for $200. And the extent of the loopholes, I won't ruin it all for you, but basically, he was able to get a judge to give him possession of his room, but because it wasn't done that way in the paperwork, the judge accidentally gave him possession of the entire building. And when he fought it at the deed place and went down and the municipal workers, they've got way too much work anyway, and so they just believed him when he said, "I'm the rightful owner of this," and so they signed over. And by the time all the lawyers and all the owners started, trying to figure out, like, wait a second, this guy is completely, taking over, it was kind of too late for a while. And then all, on and on this goes. But what was fascinating, aside from this guy's, his delusions are pretty intense, because his reasons for all this is that he's the first cousin of Christopher Columbus's son, 11 times removed, and that he wants this particular hotel because the church that had taken it over is funding arms in North Korea, and so he's actually saving the world. And so this goes on and on. And now, of course, it's all coming down. People are finally kind of getting a handle on all of it. But I was just thinking about that, how that idea of the the strength of narrative just incredibly fuels delusions, and the farmhand sort of waking from a dream is like, the pigs need feeding because they're calling for food. There's just this simple sort of call and response to the world that doesn't depend on some kind of grand narrative. So that's it.
Thank you. John Joseph. Do you have anything to say?
I really love your story about the lion, and the lion roar, and the world is at peace, or is it the world is at peace and the lion roars? And I was just turning that over and over and over in my mind as we were sitting there. It's really great. And I had a dream last night, where I was in some sort of a class, and I at the end of the class I got this like this gold certificate, and I received this gold certificate. I felt so great that this sense of completion, and so I do this organizing for this speaker series, which Zen Luminary, Pacific Zen Luminaries, and I send out letters, and I wait for responses, and I've got a lot of letters out, and a couple of people have come back and they said, yes, I want to be on your series. And I said, well, how about such and such a date? And crickets, no response. And so when I woke up from this dream, I thought, certainly this is a premonition that I will have gotten a letter from one of these people in the morning, and that fixes a date, and we're all set to go. So as soon as I woke up this morning, I checked my phone, and I did get an email. It was from American Express, and it said my statement was ready for review. So
Thank you, John. Okay. Here we are with minds as peaceful as the ocean and hearts as big as a bushel. So great. I'm going to call on a couple of people I've not called on, I think, but very much. Carlo, I think you're in the UK. Do you want to say anything?
Hello.
Hello. We got you now.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
It's funny. I was thinking about lions' roars, and it took me back to an experience I had at about 14 years old, I think, which was a great test of humility. I was in a school trip to Snowdonia in Wales, walking, climbing, hiking, good boys' own stuff. I always remember the weather I've never seen rain like it. We drove through all these flooded roads, and eventually we got to this little stone barn that we were staying in. And after a briefing from our teacher, there was so much excitement. And after this briefing from our teacher, he nominated me to basically leave the hut middle of the night, 11 o'clock at night maybe, and just to walk for 10 minutes into the darkness and find a place to stop and wait. And of course, as I left the building, all of that bravado of youth sort of evaporated. I was kind of walking into the lion's roar. As you were telling the story about Kenya, it made me think of walking into nowhere. And the strangest thing happened, which was, the darkness was bad enough. The stars were incredible. I always remember seeing constellation after constellation that I recognized from my days in the Scouts. And I found a rock to sit on. And the roar of the lion in this case was sheep. And they all came towards me, one after another. And it was frankly terrifying. there I was, sitting on a rock, thinking I was a tough rugby playing, youth. And they were the lion, they were the terrifying lion, these fluffy sheep, hundreds of them, meh, meh, these little luminous eyes. And I've never wanted human company as quickly since. I don't think it took about 10 minutes. What he had set up was, I guess, a kind of a team working exercise. The guys had to spread out and work out where I was. And strangely, that was the thought that came rushing in as you were talking about the lion's roar, the baa of the sheep.
Fair enough. All sounds are the Buddha's sounds, they say. Thank you, Carla.
Thank you, John.
When deluded, you're like a knight in a dream. A knight with a K, a knight in a dream. After enlightenment, like a farmhand rising from sleep. A mind as peaceful as the ocean, a heart as big as a bushel.